You're listening to the Exceptional Girls podcast. I'm Julie Withrow, your host and mom to Maddie, my neurodiverse, twice exceptional teenage daughter. Figuring out Maddie's unique wiring has been a game changer for her and for our relationship, but it took almost 15 years, and that's just too long. I'm on a mission to shorten the learning curve for other families by increasing awareness of neurodiversity in females, who are all too often misdiagnosed, misunderstood, or missed entirely. Join me for expert interviews, candid conversations, and hopefully even an aha moment or two, as we learn how to help our exceptional girls feel seen, supported, and celebrated. This is Season 1, Episode 4 of the Exceptional Girls podcast. In this episode, I continue the conversation I started with my daughter Maddie back in Episode 3. And we're going to pick up right where we left off. So if you haven't listened to that episode, stop here, go back and listen to Episode 3, and then meet us back here for Episode 4. So I went back to the original psychologist who had identified you gifted in the first place, right? Went back to him. It had been like 4 years later, and explained to him, you know, how things were going with you, and that I wanted to have an updated WISC, and that I also thought we should do more of a full neuropsychological evaluation, right?
Yep. And I distinctly remember your response afterwards. Like, I remember it word for word, and I remember just how awful it made me feel.
Okay, wow. So this might be new information. So go ahead, share it.
What you said to me after that result was like, I think we were in the car. We were either sitting down, either way, we were sitting down, and I wasn't really making eye contact with you or anything. But my psychologist, you said, he thinks that I want to know if you are intentionally trying to act stupid or dumb in order to be popular, like, you know, like the popular stupid girl. You distinctly asked me if I was trying to act like that, and that made me feel so bad.
What was the context around that? I really don't remember that.
I don't remember all the context around it.
I know why it was. Maybe I think I was this was actually a two-step process. So that was probably, we did the WISC first.
Yes, we 100% did.
Do you remember this? We just did the WISC first. This is all coming back to me now. And your WISC scores had looked a lot different than they did when you had taken it at age 6.
They had dropped rather drastically.
Right. And they had also changed the test. So you had taken the WISC 4 at 6, and then you took the WISC 5 at 10. And I questioned if you tried your hardest during the WISC, or if you didn't
lower my score.
Right.
But because you distinctly made the correlation that I was intentionally trying to act stupid or dumb in order to appear popular in school. And I remember my response to you when I said, Mom, at my very academically rigorous school, the only way to be popular is to be smart.
Yeah.
And it just ruined me. Like, when I tell you I cried, I was like, wow, she thinks I'm acting stupid for just trying my hardest. I must be stupid.
Yeah. See, I don't want to diminish that at all, right? Because I can't really make an excuse for that. That's the twice exceptionality thing right there. That's the nail on the head, though, because it was confusing to me how you could have been identified gifted and, you know, have the IQ score, which sounds really you didn't see, but she just did air quotes. I did air quotes. So you had the IQ score, you know, that you had, and then you could come back and have your score drop like pretty significantly across the board. Mm-hmm. And even your doctor was like, whoa, like something else is going on here, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when I went back to you and said, hey, you know, did you like throw that test? Right?
Yeah.
And that sounds, and meanwhile, but what you heard me saying was, you know, well, I think
That was definitely the implication, because
well, yeah, and so then that just made you feel more stupid.
Yeah, because at that point in time, I already felt like I wasn't smart enough, especially for the school I was in. Like, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't good enough. And at that point in time, when I heard, did you intentionally flop that test on an exam that I actually tried very hard on and was very stressed during the entire duration of, instantly, like, affirmed all of my doubts, like, in my head. At that moment, like, all of my doubts that I wasn't smart enough, that I wasn't good enough, had just been, like, confirmed in my mind. I am not good enough. I am not smart enough, because I tried my hardest on this test, and my psychologist and mother both think that I intentionally flopped it.
Well, I don't think he thought that. That was more my interpretation.
Yeah, but because of how you had said it, like, because of how you had phrased it, it made me think that that was coming from him. And I was like, oh, no.
And it's so interesting because, this, again, I'm not going to make excuses for that, right? But what it does highlight for me is just how much I didn't realize that you were struggling. And to me, this is kind of the heart of why this podcast is important to me, because this is just one of many times along the way where you were really struggling, but it was not as obvious. Maybe it wasn't obvious to me because I don't pick up on the emotional cues,
but
or maybe
I will
because
also say, I told you I was struggling a lot. I said, I don't understand what I'm doing. Like, I don't know what's going on in my classes. I have a hard time paying attention. And, like, something about that just didn't click for you until that assessment. Even after I had, like, started failing math. Like, literally
Well, that got my attention, remember?
Yeah, you were like, what's going on here? That was, like, the first time you started really questioning it. You didn't really notice, though, that something was actually wrong until that.
Right.
Like,
it was like, I think the way it was like something would bubble to the surface and it would get worse and worse and worse. And then I'd be like, okay, this is something very real. We need to investigate it. That happened when you were 6. Mm-hmm. Then things got better for a little while. Then it happened again when you were 10, right? Then we got the ADHD diagnosis and things got a little better for a while. And then with things bubbled up again when you were around 14, really, right? And remember, so that was when we started talking about autism. And to your point, you didn't bring that up to me. I brought it up to you. But when I did, you were like, yeah, I've been thinking about that.
Yeah, like, I've been looking into that.
But were you afraid to mention it to me?
Yeah, because in my mind, and this is also because, I tend to get caught up in past experiences. And even if it's just, like, one past experience where someone thought I was weird for doing something, like, I'd never do that again, even if everyone else was cool with it and they expected it. Which was, like, there was a whole thing with last names. It was a thing. But what happened there, I think, was that because of those past experiences of bringing up something bringing up ADHD to you, which was something that I viewed as extremely benign, was such a struggle back then. I thought that if I brought up something like autism spectrum disorder, which is like a buzzword, autism is a buzzword, that you would shut it down, like, immediately. Like, there would be not even the slightest consideration.
And there's a possibility that I might have, right? Although I'm not sure, because I'd actually done a lot of study into ADHD at that point. So I was already kind of immersing myself in this concept of neurodiversity, starting with ADHD. If you remember, I took a class in it and stuff so I could learn more about it. And I was getting more open to it. But instead, what happened with the autism thing was I was listening to another podcast, which is a great podcast and I really like, called Tilt Parenting by Debbie Reber. And I was listening to that podcast and I'd listened to it quite a bit. And it was really helping me understand the twice exceptionality piece, which was something I started to learn more about after your ADHD diagnosis. And she talked to a lot of different people and still does about neurodiversity. And she had a woman on the podcast who was talking about autism in girls because she worked with teenage girls. And as she was talking about what autism was like for these girls, I had this light bulb moment. I remember I was out walking like I usually am. I either walk or run or something, listening to the podcast. I remember being out walking and this whole light bulb coming on. And me, this is the irony, me being worried about like, wow, I really want to talk to Maddie about this and see if she thinks this sounds like it might be real for her. But I was afraid to bring it up to you. So I was strategizing about how I could have like a conversation with you and introduce this concept without you freaking out. But you remember what happened?
Yeah, we were on the couch. We were on the couch and you had paused your show and I was like, oh boy, she's going to talk. And yeah, it started out with like you just generally talking about my past diagnoses. And then you were like, so I've been looking into, and I think that you also may have brought up like somebody from my past who had Asperger's, which is the
yes,
exact
I did.
time,
a former classmate who had Asperger's.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was why you were so nervous to bring it up too, because I was so not like that classmate and I so did not like that classmate that it was like, so you remember so-and-so. Yeah, well, he had Asperger's, and Asperger's is now considered autism, and like yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. It sounds a little bit like you. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah. And that was when I really started to dive into the differences between how boys and girls present, right? How neurodiversity might look different in a girl than a boy, because how she talked about autism and specifically Asperger's syndrome in girls sounded so much like you to me. But if I, had compared you to your former classmate, who was a boy, I could see some similarities, but he was much different than you, right? Had a much harder time, I think, kind of composing himself sometimes and not just blurting out answers and stuff, right? He had this impulsivity that was very different.
I have that impulsivity too, where like, and it wasn't as obvious though. It wasn't as visceral.
Right.
In me as it was in him. Like, he would blurt out answers in like public places or when it was super not appropriate. And like, meanwhile in school, if like a teacher was like, what is 2 + 2? I go like, oh, it's 4. Without like raising my hand, just like out loud, just thinking out loud to myself because I didn't have a filter.
But did you get poor reactions when you would do things like that?
Absolutely. And that kind of encouraged me. And this is what I think. I don't think that the differences between how autism appears in boys and girls are innate. I think that they are learned, because when I did that, I got a very poor reaction from everyone, including my like friends and classmates. When he did that, the reaction was kind of poor, but it was also like, oh, boys will be boys. And he also had a diagnosis at that time, so it was like, oh, it's just his Asperger's acting up. To me, he had not only, like, he had an excuse. He had 2 excuses, and I had none. And, like, I was so afraid of being treated like I was defective, right?
Right.
Like, that I didn't work, that I was, like, broken, or that I couldn't act normal. And I was also kind of afraid of being like him.
Yeah. So that was in 2nd grade, right? So I don't think I realized back then that you might blurt out answers and get negative reactions.
Mm-hmm.
Was that happening back then?
I also had poor noise control, and I was also
What do you mean poor noise control?
Poor noise control as in, like, I would yell when people were talking, and I still do that now. I project a lot.
You have no inside voice.
I have no inside voice. That's what made me so great at theater. The teacher would be like, I want you to project like you're yelling. And I was like, oh, great, I do that all the time. So let me just yell for you. It was great. Really found my people there. But like there were other things where like certain social things. And back then, when we were in second grade, these weren't as big of a deal or received as much as a negative response as they do now. Like, a classmate that I, like, barely knew at this point in time and maybe had spoken to, like, in passing, in group conversations a few times, she was writing something, and I was like, oh, wow, I really like your handwriting. You're super cool. And I was just, like, kind of showering her with very, like, casual compliments that you would do with your best friend. And I hardly knew this girl. And, of course, when receiving compliments, you kind of don't know what to do. And around the point of second grade, you're starting to learn that people react to you differently. Mm-hmm. And she seemed kind of awkward. Like, didn't know how to receive these compliments. And I didn't pick up on how awkward she was until literally, like, a few years later, like, how I had just kept pushing her into a uncomfortable situation that in my mind, I should have noticed because it was so obvious.
Oh, so she was uncomfortable.
Yeah, she was, like, very visibly uncomfortable. She was like, oh, thanks. And it was showing in her body language, in her facial expressions.
So do you think you were coming on too strong?
Oh, way too strong.
Mm-hmm.
And funnily enough, I actually ended up, after third grade, I ended up going to middle school with this girl. And we were way more chill then. And it wasn't a big deal. Like, she didn't remember that. But that one instance had kept me up at night, like, a long while after that, when I realized, wow, I made her feel super uncomfortable, and it was super obvious, but I just kept going.
Because you weren't picking up on the cues from her? I couldn't pick up on it.
Like, I couldn't pick up on the fact that I was making her uncomfortable, that I was doing something wrong.
Were there other things like that happened where you felt like girls... I mean, I imagine that this is mostly in girl dynamics, but I don't want to assume that.
It was mostly in girl dynamics because I had mostly female friends back then. Not so much anymore. But yeah, back then it was particularly in, like, dynamics with other girls that not only was I unable to read their reactions, but I was also, like, unable to respond to certain situations. Like, a lot of situations would make me uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to stick up for myself. Mm-hmm. And I was very bad at confrontation, still kind of am. So I was simultaneously coming on too strong to other people, and other people would make me feel uncomfortable when they came on too strong, and I couldn't reconcile the two.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think that affected your friendships or your ability to have friendships?
There were a few girls, especially, who I always thought were more mature than me and who I should strive to be more like. And didn't go very well for me because it turns out changing yourself in a day isn't super easy. But I kind of latched on to this idea of there are girls that are more mature than me, have more friends, and are cooler than I am. So I'm going to do everything in my power to be just like them.
And how did that go?
Not very well.
Why not?
At the start, it was because I was just bad at what they were good at. Like, they had certain social understandings that I didn't have. It's like if you try to copy something from a picture as opposed to actually having the real thing in your hands, you're not going to do as good of a job. I was just copying because I knew how they responded, but I didn't know why they responded that way. So I was just going off of what I saw, not an understanding of their personalities.
So did they accept you after that?
Or no, absolutely not. I did have friends, and I was friends with a few of them. And I guess I also was just kind of endearing back then because I was very nice and showered people with compliments. So maybe if you were a little uncomfortable, at least you knew I was nice.
I have a question about that. Were those compliments real, or were you trying to win people?
Very real. So. And they were compliments specifically about the things in them that I didn't like about myself, which is why they came off so strong. Like, this girl had really nice handwriting, and I was like, wow, your handwriting's really nice, because my handwriting was awful, and I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't. It still isn't great, but it's better. back then it was unreadable. And I was like, wow, you have really nice handwriting. Like, it's super nice. Like, it's super easy to read, because I didn't have nice handwriting, and I couldn't write like that. And I wanted to be able to do that. And that was something that I latched onto about this girl. She has something that I don't.
Right. But maybe because you were very effusive, right, very expressive about it and very complimentary, maybe to her it may have felt disingenuous, or
I don't think that it was...
Or just too much.
It was just too strong.
Yeah.
Like, because she was also a very polite, like, mild-mannered, like, she was super polite, very mild-mannered. And I guess to her, and this is just an assumption, but I think to her, like, my rapid compliments of her were just too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just wasn't something that either she was used to experiencing or that she was comfortable experiencing. Like, or maybe she had her own self-doubts about it. Like, there could have been any number of things. Either way, she was very visibly uncomfortable, and I just couldn't pick up on it.
Yeah. Right. And I think I've seen, and I've seen you change around people as a result.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it started, because after a while I realized that I was just copying their behavior and I didn't really understand why they behaved that way. And that made me, and then I started working on that, and that made me very, very good at acting.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Because I was acting in pretty much every social interaction I ever had. It became pretty natural for me, because then it was easier for me to replicate for me to, like, change up my personality, because I was understanding why these people acted that way.
Right.
And, like, what they were thinking when they got that. And that's also why I started getting into character creation, because I would build a character to appeal to the person I was talking to.
Which is masking,
yes,
that's
masking
what that is,
and chameleoning.
Right? Mm-hmm.
So, like, I could go, and this is not uncommon, especially in my generation, but, like, I would go up to somebody and I would be speaking to them for a while. And then the second they left, I started talking to another person, I would change everything. I would change my body language, the way that I walked, my voice, my tone, like, the voice that I used. And it was obvious. Like, I would go from talking like, oh yeah, that's super great, I'd really like to do that with you, to, hey dude, what's up?
Yeah.
Like, just...
Why were you doing that?
Because I desperately wanted people to like me.
Right.
I desperately, desperately wanted people to like me. So I made what I thought was an ideal person to them. A person who was just enough like them, but just enough, like, but slightly different from them, to appeal the most to that person's specific interests and taste.
So was that effective?
In some cases it was, in some cases it wasn't, because I wasn't super great at maintaining this.
Oh, yeah.
And especially in, like, a crowd of people, when I was talking to multiple people at the same time.
Right. Then what do you do, right?
Like, then like, you have to, like, reconcile that with all of your personalities going at once.
Yeah, there was a time where I think you thought you had, I don't want to go down this path too far, but there was a time where you actually, I think, thought you had multiple personalities.
No, I didn't think I had multiple personality disorder, because I knew what that looked like, and right. I knew what DID looked like, and I still do. What I thought I had was something where I thought I had something that was similar, but, like, different than that.
Got it.
Where, like, I would switch between different personalities subconsciously, but it was still fundamentally me doing it.
Right.
Because DID is often classified as being unaware in that situation, or, like, blacking out. Like, it's an actual different person in the same body.
Right.
And typically you, like, don't remember it. I did remember it, and I knew I was doing it. It was just so natural to me at that point that I thought that there could be a word to it.
Got it. So let's fast forward to today. So do you still do this chameleoning and masking?
In some cases I do, in some cases I don't. Let me rephrase that. I absolutely do, but not all the time. And not to the degree that I did last time, that I used to, because it didn't really work out all that well for me. Like, even when I got really good at acting, it still just didn't work out all that well for me.
What, and how do you mean? Like, what do you mean it didn't work out very well?
Like, people because I was constantly reconciling all of these different acts at the same time, and because I fundamentally had a hard time understanding social cues and reading what was appropriate in a situation, I ended up eventually driving a lot of these people away and, like, making stupid mistakes around them, or, like, vastly overestimating how comfortable they were.
So it was too hard to maintain.
Yes, it was far too hard. So eventually I was just kind of like, well, whatever happens, happens.
So do you have friends now who you feel like you can be yourself with?
It's not that simple, because after a while of doing this, I don't really know who myself is. Like, I can pin down a couple of base traits and personality traits and all that stuff, but I don't really know who I am. I have a disassociation with myself. Like, I can't reconcile my inner monologue and my body. Like, I can't connect things anymore. Like, a lot of pieces of who I was were lost along the way of trying to be who everyone else wanted.
Where or when do you feel most like yourself?
When I am alone, making stories and drawing and writing, because I have a really hard time, because to me, what makes it hard for me to be myself is the people aspect of being yourself around people.
Yeah, it's the social interaction piece.
So even though I am pretty, like, upfront and I guess you could say, like, authentic with my friends now, I always worry that people are either judging me, like that's something that I hold on to, and I also always feel like I'm putting on an act. Like, I can't.
Do you feel like an imposter?
Anymore.
Like,
yeah, definitely. I feel like an imposter, and sometimes I'll do things that are like, wow, that came off as, like, me being a total, like, smartass.
I think we talk about this sometimes, the rumination after certain social exchanges, or how you'll, like, run it over in your head again and again and again.
Yeah, especially because this year was in person. I was very active and engaged in classes, and, like, a little bit after school ended, but throughout the course of the year, I was like, wow, I'm sure plenty of people thought that I was a complete smartass and teacher's pet.
Because you were so comfortable because you weren't in person.
Yeah.
So, but don't you think that's who you really are, though? Is maybe, I mean, not a smart ass teacher's pet.
Let me explain. But here's what I realized after that. Like, after I thought about that for a few seconds, I was like, listen, if people view wanting to do good in school and enjoying certain activities like reading and learning as a problem, that's a problem with them.
Yeah, good for you.
That is a them problem, because first of all, this is my success, it's my hobbies, it's my interests, and it's me doing what I feel comfortable doing. If you take issue with that, if you take issue with me wanting to engage in class, then it just shows how not good at this you are. Like, how much better than you I am. No, that came out wrong. No.
Well, I think you take school seriously.
Yeah, it just shows that I have my priorities in order. I know what I want.
Right.
And if you think that that's a bad thing, if you think that me wanting to actively participate in class or, like, going above and beyond in my schoolwork as being as trying too hard or being a smartass or a teacher's pet, keep doing your thing. I'm sure you're doing real good right now. I'm going to keep doing my thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's none of your business.
I think we should talk another time about what it'll be like when you go back to in person, if that might be different. But I don't want to do that just yet, because I want to make sure that we kind of stay on track. So
you're going to have your editing work cut out for you, Mother.
I always do. This is what it is when you put two people who have, kind of busy meandering minds together to talk. So what changed between us and when, do you think?
I think that towards the end of 5th grade, when I got my diagnosis, that was, like, when things started changing. I think they really started changing, like, I think it was either early 7th grade or late 6th grade when you learned, when I communicated not directly to you, but when you learned by being present in the conversation, how I really felt during 5th grade when things all came to a head and just how seriously sad I was.
Mm-hmm.
And things got really much better after you pulled me out of 7th grade.
Right.
Because that's when you started recognizing, first of all, that's when you started listening to me.
Yeah, so let me make sure I say that. And I believe I talked about it briefly in the very first episode where I talked about the podcast. But in the middle of 7th grade, I withdrew you from your public middle school and homeschooled you for the rest of that school year.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I did that, that was a big deal, right? Because you felt what?
I felt better. Just generally, I felt happier.
Right. But because I actually, because I took you seriously.
Yes,
right?
because I felt listened to. Because earlier that year, I had expressed my desire to be homeschooled.
Mm-hmm.
That I just couldn't keep doing this anymore. And then around the middle of 7th grade, I got super depressed. And it was the same kind of depressed I was in 5th grade. So when you pulled me out, when just general school chaos that wasn't tied to me, but was tied to like the school district and my school in particular, came to a head, it not only felt like you were listening to me and taking me seriously, it also felt like you were getting better at recognizing when I was upset.
Yeah.
Because I was clearly very upset.
Yeah. I mean, I think at that point, you know what it was, and again, this is just me being frank, even though it doesn't sound like I was the greatest mom. By that point, I knew that you weren't just being overly dramatic, that you weren't just crying wolf, which was, something that we used to feel like because honestly, you were pretty expressive about what wasn't working for you a lot. When you were younger, and this is partially because of how I was raised, my parents wouldn't have tolerated that very well from me. And as a result, and that's all I knew, I wasn't tolerating it very well from you. And I thought you were just, complaining to get attention or complaining to be dramatic. I mean, I've since learned that, when kids aren't doing what you want them to, when this happens to adults too, when they aren't doing what you want them to do, often it's because they cannot, right? When people are acting out, it's because something isn't working for them. Mm-hmm. People generally want to do the so-called right things. And when they can't, it's because there's some obstacle in the way and you need to pay attention to that, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that now. But when you were younger, I really struggled with how much of me responding to that was me just coddling you, right?
Yeah.
Versus me really listening and understanding that something wasn't working.
And a lot of parents don't realize this, every single thing that you say, that you say to your child, that you forget, they remember. And I remember the worst things said to me from all corners of my family. I remember all of them, and I can tell you exactly who said them and when, even though most of them, especially you, don't remember that. So when I tell you, we're like, oh my God, I did that? Because it sounds so terrible now. Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
But you don't remember that, and I do, and this is true for a lot of kids. If you tell them that they're over dramatic when they're little, they aren't going to tell you things when they're older because they internalize that. Because at a fundamental point in their development, you told them you are over dramatic. Whenever they have an issue, they're going to think I am over dramatic.
Right, because through our reaction and our words carry a lot more weight oftentimes than we really realize or appreciate.
Especially in a
right,
developing
we've
child.
Devalued your experience.
Yeah, so like one of the worst things that you can ever say to a kid ever is, you're too young to be stressed. First of all,
a lot of people used to say that to you.
Everyone used to say that to me.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. And every single time I internalized that, and it wasn't just that, oh, I'm too young to be stressed now, which you are not. You are never too young to be stressed. Stress does not have an age limit. I carried that into when I was older, that I was never going to be old enough to be stressed.
Mm-hmm.
That even as a 13-year-old going through some really dark stuff, I was still not old enough to be stressed. And that even when I was like an old woman sitting in my rocking chair, knitting some gloves, I was still too young to be stressed. That that I would never be old enough to be stressed. I would never be allowed to be stressed.
Yeah, it was more about being allowed to be stressed, I think, because in truth, that is very uncomfortable for the grownups in your life because we don't know how to help you. Mm-hmm. And so we're not doing that deliberately or, maliciously. It's that we feel powerless. And so because we're coming at it from that feeling, I think we're trying to just, make it
a non-issue.
Yeah, that's right. Like exactly. And it's a little more complicated than that. But yes, because we can't deal with it, we tell you that it can't be real, right? Mm-hmm. Because we can't deal with that.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you tell your kid you're not old enough to be stressed when they're 5, in truth, you will keep telling them you're not old enough to be stressed when they're 18.
Yeah.
You will keep doing that because you have kept not understanding. And then it doesn't become an old enough issue anymore. It becomes a permission issue. You need permission to feel stressed. You need permission to be anxious. You need permission from your parents or your teachers or whoever. And you're never going to get that permission. And so you hold it inside you and you pretend like it's not real and you diminish yourself. You say, wow.
Right. Or you dissociate from that part of yourself. Right.
And you often condemn it. Like you self-deprecate yourself for it. You're like, wow, you are being so over dramatic right now. Like you are not allowed to be stressed. You cannot be stressed. So why do you think you're stressed? Like, what an idiot. Mm-hmm. What an overdramatic liar you are. And when you carry that with you, it eats away at you over time. And every single time I heard it, because I heard it a lot, especially when I was little, I got so angry because I knew it was wrong, because I knew I was feeling stressed, but there was nothing I could say that was going to change your mind. And then as I got even older, I started to believe that it was true. And that's a form of unintentional gaslighting. Mm-hmm. Like removing the person's lived experience, not having them trust their intuition anymore because you cannot handle it.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's all very true. I mean, it's not easy, as a parent to hear those things, but I know they're true, right? I mean, we make a lot of mistakes as parents.
Came especially from my grandparents too. That came a lot from my grandparents.
And generationally, those things happen as well. So I think, to try to wrap up this episode, which is kind of hard because, we could keep talking about it.
Yeah, we could keep going on for hours and hours.
So what do you think works about our relationship today? I want to try to end on kind of a positive note.
Oh, absolutely. Communication and actually listening to what the other party has to say. Like, especially in my case, because when you are the kid in a parent-child relationship, you have inherently less power. Part of that comes from having a form of equality where you are listened to and actually understood. Mm-hmm. And instead of the parent who has the power in the situation and oftentimes wants to keep it, like shutting it down because they can't handle it, listening and trying to learn and better yourself for the sake of the child who cannot do it for themselves.
Right. So how do you know that I'm doing all that? How do you know I understand you?
Well, because you've started listening to me, and when I express an issue I have with you, you don't say what oftentimes I used to hear, which was things like, you're being over dramatic, you're not trying hard enough. Instead now I hear things like, okay. And like, at the very least, realizing that nothing that you say is going to change my experience and accepting it for what it is. Like, sometimes I'm just sad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sad. Why? I just am. Okay.
Right. Well, I don't think I diminish it as much anymore. And I also don't always try to fix it because I know I can't.
Yes. Like, certain things cannot be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when I'm sad and it's like, I'm sad right now. Okay. Instead of trying to push back and say, well, there has to be a reason, because there doesn't. Sometimes you're just sad. Mm-hmm. I am oftentimes just sad without a reason. I just start feeling that way.
Right.
And part of it comes with just accepting that not only is that precisely what's going on, there's also not much you can do to fix it. So just accept it and try to help them like work through it in the moment as best they can.
Right. Or sometimes you just need me to listen.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need a hug, right?
Yes. I just need a hug or a head pat or any form of affirmation.
Right, which I think we do now,
yes.
way more than we used to.
Mm.
I think we also have a sense of humor about things now that we never had before, probably because we couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, like we're much more silly about things now. And it's easier to, it's that also having a sense of humor like that, like being able to have humor around things allows you to easily diffuse situations that are getting a little too heated.
Well, and I think to have a really authentic sense of humor around it that's not sarcastic is an indicator that we have an understanding of each other. There has to be a certain amount of safety in a relationship to have that level of humor.
Yeah.
Right? Where you're not being mean. It's not like some hidden agenda humor. It's just, kind of a shared understanding type of humor.
Yes, like an inside joke type of humor.
Yeah, like there's an inside joke type of a humor that works, right? So is there anything you want to say before we end this episode?
Not really. I just said a lot. So I'm kind of...
So what does that mean for you at the end of a big talk like this? Now do you have to go do a big think?
I have to do a big think, then a big cry.
And then, right, a big think, a big cry, and then...
A big nap.
Right, and then we'll make a big dinner.
Not gonna do all of that before that. Dinner happens somewhere in between those steps.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed our conversation, even though there are parts of it that are always hard for me to hear. We have these conversations sometimes, and that's exactly why I wanted to record them, because I feel like it's very valuable to share this stuff, even if it is kind of hard for me to have to hear it sometimes as a parent. I think that these candid conversations can be really helpful to other people to listen into and maybe, learn from some of the mistakes that I've made and learn from some of the things that we're doing well. Are you comfortable with this conversation?
Yeah.
And if I wanted you to come back on again, would you be willing to do that?
Sure.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. I have a lot of things to say.
Oh, so we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, yes.
We're just getting started here.
I am going to go to every corner.
Oh, really?
Nothing is sacred, Mom.
Nothing is sacred. Well, on that note, I think that we can wrap up this episode. So thank you for being here, Madeline.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Exceptional Girls podcast. If you liked today's episode, it would mean the world to me if you'd subscribe, leave a rating and review, and recommend it to just one other person who you think would benefit from listening. Even a small act of support helps the podcast reach more people, which in turn helps increase awareness and understanding of exceptionality in girls. And if you have suggestions for future episodes, please share them. You can connect with me, your host, Julie Withrow, through our website at exceptionalgirlspodcast.com/contact. And that's a wrap. Ciao for now.